Hello, my name is Anya,
And my name is Kelly.
and today we are going to be discussing the impacts that quality of life indicators hold in education equity and access in a global context. This research presentation done for the Big Data Challenge of 2020 to 2021. In this study, we wanted to comprehend and assess the severity of the impact that quality of life indicators have on education by comparing them to education statistics.
A factor to be analyzed in this presentation is the locations that are more prone or unlikely to student success and the methods used to achieve these results. Therefore, we hypothesize that the opportunities of education are dependent on the prosperity of a country in terms of its quality of life provided to its citizens.
In this particular presentation, four main data sets were obtained from the resources Our World in Data and the World Bank. They are as follows: the Human Development Index to the PISA reading test, comparing the gross domestic product per capita to learning outcomes per country, comparing student performance to government expenditure per primary student, and the statistics for life expectancy. To get an accurate reading for our results, we utilized each factor as a method of representation. The GDP factor utilized was a measure of wealth available to a person. The life expectancy was a measure of medical accessibility and health, while the government expenditure per student variable measured education accessibility. In order to see an assessment of a country's overall quality of life provided, we utilized the Human Development Index as the last data point.
In terms of the method to view each correlation, we utilize the software Jupyter and in it use the language known as Python. Within the language, there are several different libraries used to graph each dataset, including Pandas, NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. Moving on to our results, we graphed four scatter plots to outline the correlation between the different factors that will contribute to the overall study. In the first graph shown below, we compared the Human Development Index from the UN to PISA reading results. We discovered, based on our data that was collected, data points were mainly scattered, showing a weak positive correlation with the R-squared value of 0.396. For many continents, there wasn't any noticeable correlation, but for Africa, they had a relatively low range, and the opposite occurring for Europe. Asia had the second highest plot points located on the chart, which was closely grouped with North America, Oceania, and South America.
Gross domestic product. Within the data procured, there was almost a non-existent effect that gross domestic product per capita held on to learning outcomes per country, with the data containing an R-squared value of 0.14. Within each continent, there was a significant difference on how they were impacted by this condition, which may have caused some inconsistencies within the data. Europe displayed a tendency to have countries gather in a centralized region, whereas in North America there was an observed positive correlation that was concentrated in the left corner. However, in Asia, the points were scattered upon the graph with no further trends occurring, while in Africa, despite the few points, they were all gathering in a minuscule cluster located in the lower end of the graph's spectrum. Lastly, in South America, there was a positive correlation occurring throughout the graph.
In this graph, which outlines the effects of government expenditure, there was an indication of a weak trend resulting with the obtained R-square value of 0.41. For the continents Europe and South America, there was a gathering of data points around a central area, one for each. While for North America and Asia, the scatter points mostly displaced, indicating almost no form of comparison for the continents. Unfortunately, there was no data available to be used for the continent of Africa.
Life expectancy. Illustrated below, we can understand that there was a weak trend to be demonstrated with an R-squared value of 0.41, as most countries had quite a bit of differentiation in their placements of data points. For continents such as Africa, Asia, and Oceania, most points didn't have a substantial trend, with countries showing a lot of variety in placement. However, for Europe, it demonstrated a past tendency in which the countries gathered together. After assessing the graphs earlier, we are now going to see how the graph outcomes are caused by continents and their individual countries. In all shown graphs, there was a noticeable trend in Europe for which the countries were regularly clustered in a graphical region. This can be mainly accredited to the European Union, or the EU, a social, political, and economic union between 27 member states or countries. The European Union combines the aspect of a base education system that can be tailored with the ability to give feedback and communicate ideas for successful methods and teaching strategies. This creates a plan that has a fixed approach for students but is flexible and easy to improve, allowing for a more even delivery of education.
For Africa, despite the few countries shown throughout the data, they were mostly displayed by a small collection of countries towards the lower end of each graph. These trends can be associated with the household poverty, as GDP for these countries are relatively low, meaning that many people are struggling to finance education, work, and nutrition. Another reason was the lack of funds from the government to address secondary and university level tuition compared to the investments of subsidization for primary students.
South America. For South America, we found that most countries displayed positive correlations throughout all graphs, but they occurred within the lower spectrum. This can be associated with a large poverty gap in the country. A contributing factor is racism, lingering after the effects of social and economic classification on appearance by the early conquests of Europe. This directly correlates towards certain groups being unable to fund their children for education, as the systematic treatment resulted in an uneven distribution of financial gains. This even reduced the amount of children entering the workforce as an independent.
For Asia, there was a rather large amount of scatter point displays, with no identifying correlation to attribute to. This can be associated with the fact that Asia can be distinctly categorized into five broad groups: Western, Southern, Central, Southeast, and East Asia. However, in our survey, we can only cover East, West, and South Asia. In East Asia, there is a better understanding of education from different uses of learning techniques, which would have resulted in producing higher rankings on each graph. In South Asia, there are large gaps in the economy, causing an uneven delivery of education, as some students do not achieve curriculum standards before graduating. Finally, in West Asia, there are many ongoing conflicts in the past years, reducing the effectiveness and preparations for professions in the workforce.
North America. A few countries from North America, such as Canada and the United States, were observed to have a relatively high placement in many graphs. These countries contain comprehensive education planning systems that give many opportunities for all genders from elementary school to post secondary. However, the countries from North America located near the bottom of the graphs are associated with Central America and the Caribbean, which do not contain such diversity in their curriculum. A large population of these children live in remote locations, reducing their access to wireless fidelity or Wi Fi, and in turn leaving them behind on resources to supplement learning, and may even cause them to lag behind in pandemics or epidemics, where remote learning is heavily relied upon. These remote locations often result in large distances from school, making it an inconvenience to travel in certain seasons or weather, causing these children to fall behind. We have understood the inconsistencies in education delivery throughout the world, but in order to fix them, there must be a willing effort to effectively focus on them. Here are some ideas that we discussed to be potential solutions. The first one is to create opportunities for the adult demographic. As many adults have been unable to achieve a diploma, allowing for these opportunities would let them pursue more options in jobs or degrees. This also would increase the likelihood of their children entering such universities, as they have experienced a change in quality of life before and after. The second idea would be to invest in a national healthcare program, such as a National Health Service in the United Kingdom. This program would reduce the financial burden that medical care has on families and can then be spent on rent, food, and education. Lastly, we would like to increase the amount of funding for schools and students. A larger budget for schools means better quality buildings with more technologically advanced features, and more funding for students would allow for more resources to supplement their learning.
One aspect we can further develop on in our report is to obtain data for countries and continents, such as Africa or Oceania. Our results for these continents are very minimum, and we can improve on an accurate representation of their current situation. A challenge that occurred while completing our project was the lack of experience with programming in Python and formats of scientific reports and studies. But with the resources given to us by the challenge, we were able to apply our new knowledge onto this report. If we were to repeat this study, it would be more beneficial to include different factors that would affect our results, such as the amount of children per family and the average age in which women marry. In conclusion, As a result from this investigation onto the impacts that quality of life indicators pose onto factors of education, we have discovered that although there is a weak trend as of now, there is still an effect up to a certain extent. Without the ability to learn and grow, humanity would never be able to survive on its own, and it is important now more than ever to be able to foster the independence and skills children require in order to benefit the world.
Thank you to STEM Fellowship for making this all possible, and to all the staff and mentors that provided guidance and advice throughout this research. Thank you so much for listening.